Right, good morning. Different papers. We took a good tangent last week. I very much enjoyed last week's class.
Yes, we did.
And I thought that I was talking to my wife, and I said, instead of just keeping it in a theoretical realm of, this way, that way, I thought maybe we'd actually analyze a few places where they practically come into to play, where you see that these two different worldviews and how they relate to hot topics in the Jewish community today. And how it is that both sides took very different approaches to this problem, and I'd be interested in seeing where we all fall in this discussion. There's a rabbi named Rabbi Mark Angel. He seems to be very famous. He's an interesting combination of a Sephardic modern Orthodox rabbi. I don't know much about him. I know he's a big Talmid Chacham from the way he writes. I happen to not always agree with his conclusions in Jewish thought or halacha. It doesn't take away from his knowledge or his greatness as a rabbi, just because I'm handing out an article from him doesn't mean that it's a stamp of approval on everything he's ever written. But this article, I saw it a while back, and it just, something about it,
it spoke to you.
Yeah, it was very deep and it was a brilliant analysis of the situation without taking emotional sides, but rather just viewing halachic texts. If you really understand what it is that we're going to read together, you will understand why I fell in love with the world of halakha. This is the reason why halakha makes a difference. People, they're so into Jewish. Every rabbi, they teach about the parsha, they teach about Jewish ethics and morals, and they tell you about Jewish history. And those are all wonderful topics, but they're all telling the same stuff. There's a different rabbi speaking a different language, Sometimes I feel like we have to speak about the things that no one else is speaking about. Right now there's a big issue raging in Israel. Anyone know what I'm talking about? They went into the Israeli news.
Yes, but I don't know what it is.
Huge issue that's shaking up the state of Israel right now.
Issue of the day?
It's the issue of the year already.
Changes.
Yes, it does.
It's the conversion bill that's been proposed in the Knesset. Have you heard about this?
Yeah. No.
There have been a few Knesset members, and it's interesting. I disagree with the bill on the grounds that politicians shouldn't be suggesting halachic bills. When you need to go to the doctor, you ask the doctor what you don't go to the biotech guy and ask him for help. It's the other way around. The rabbis should be suggesting rabbinic bills, and the politicians should be suggesting political bills. But that's part of the mess that is the state of Israel. But the idea behind the bill, I think it's a great idea. Everyone else thinks it's a disaster waiting to happen. And it's reached a point where the bill is proposing to open up conversion to many more people than already are allowed to be able to convert in the state of Israel. It would be giving more rabbinic courts that today don't have the legal right to convert people in Israel, the legal right to convert people. Meaning instead of there being a dozen or half a dozen, I don't know how many conversion courts in the state of Israel, now every rabbinic court in the state of Israel who's competent would be able to perform conversions. Now, rabbinic court is a rabbinic court. It's not saying that every Joe Schmo can do a conversion. The hope is that if they get rid of the clogged system and they open it up a little bit more, then the process will speed up a little bit. The people will feel a little bit more taken care of. They will perhaps lower the anger that exists among that community in Israel today. The chief rabbinate opposes this bill unanimously. One, under the grounds that you shouldn't be giving us religious bills. You shouldn't be the ones proposing religious bills. But more than that, because the chief rabbinate of Israel gets a certain high off of being in control of the situation in Israel. It's like a certain high. We run the world, we own the world. If you don't live up to our standards, you're a nobody. Part of that high is the conversion court. That they're the ones that they choose who's a convert, who's a Jew, who's not a Jew, and all of those things. And this bill is going to push some much needed reform into that system that the system doesn't want. And so it's already passed two different legal bodies in Israel, and there's a third body that's waiting on approval. We'll see where it goes, but for right now, this article that we're going to learn together might shed a lot of light on an issue that doesn't just plague Israel, but plagues the American system as well.
Who's pushing it through? Who's behind the...
A few Knesset members and the reform movement.
Are there so many people who are in that camp?
You today have about 360,000 citizens of the state of Israel who are considered no religion. because they claim to be from Jewish families, meaning mostly Jews from the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, that came to Israel. And between you and me, the chances of them being halachically Jewish are slim to none. It was a great option to leave the Soviet Union and come to Israel.
Right.
On the other hand, they were only allowed entry to the state of Israel because their grandfather was Jewish or their father was Jewish or something along those lines. And in Israel, that means that you have the right of return. You can make aliyah, but you don't have the right to be a Jew, whatever that right brings you in the state of Israel, until you convert, right? And so the problem is that there's always been this, okay, so we won't let them convert. They don't really want to convert. What do they care to convert? They don't really want to be Jewish. And what it's been leading to is the army, for example, when they're in the army, so they're mainstream, they're Israelis, they speak Hebrew, I mean, they're children of already a second generation immigrants from the Soviet Union. And they date Israeli girls and Israeli boys just like anybody else does because they're serving in the same army and they speak the same language, and for all intents and purposes they claim they're Jewish. And then you have huge problems because then this couple wants to get married and the chief rabbi says, oh, they're not even Jewish. But they're just as Jewish as I am. I don't keep Shabbat, they don't keep Shabbat, I don't keep kosher, they don't keep
I have
kosher.
a question.
Sure.
So they're not Jewish because it was only their grandmother or grandfather that was?
Normally, the only reason they have the right of return is not because they're halachically Jewish, meaning religiously Jewish, rather because they're somewhat affiliated with a Jewish relative, which gave them the right of return to the state of Israel.
I find that very difficult because I remember when I lived there, I remember Israel sending back hundreds and hundreds of Russians who weren't Jewish because they came in on the auspices of being Jewish.
And then we're unable to prove that meaning those are people who try to jump on the bandwagon.
That is correct.
Here you're talking about people who can prove that they had a grandfather or a father, but just not enough to make him what we would call halachically Jewish.
Correct.
Because they didn't have a grandmother and a mother?
Because from their maternal side they're not Jewish.
Maternal side, not Jewish.
And so the thing is that you have two camps here. And both camps are saying, one camp is saying, listen, if you just make conversion so easy that anyone can do it, you're going to be losing the nature, the shape, the form, the consistency of the Jewish people. And you have another camp that says, no, you don't understand what you're saying. The stricter you are regarding conversion, the harder you make it, the more exclusive you make it, the more lenient you're being regarding assimilation. Because essentially you have the ability to convert these Jews and make them Jewish. And you're saying, I don't want to. Why? Because I want to be exclusive in my Jewish community. But in essence, these people are mainstreamed into Israeli life in the first place, and they're going to marry people, and they're going to date people, and they're going to have kids with people. And so what solution are you actually proposing? This has been a Cold War for the last who knows how many years. And the community in Israel has been more and more open to this change and to this understanding of maybe we have to change our standards of conversion. About 3 or 4 years ago, when I was living in Israel, the Israeli army rabbinate came under extreme scrutiny. And that was because they were known that they had a 6-month conversion program. Basically, when you join the Israeli army, you're not Jewish, let's say, and you want to be Jewish, for example, someone from the former Soviet Union, they'll send you into a program, you go to Shabbat to people's houses, so on and so forth. 6 months later, you come in front of the chief rabbinate, they ask you a few questions, they dunk you in a mikveh, you're Jewish. The ultra right-wing Haredi rabbis sitting in Jerusalem and Bnei Brak put out a letter saying these Jews aren't Jewish. They're not Jews. They didn't go through a valid conversion. That's not a conversion. Conversion means you join the Jewish people and you commit to keeping the Torah mitzvot and the laws and so on and so forth. And so this was such a big deal that the state of Israel decided that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef would be consulted to deal with this matter. And Rabbi Ovadia Yosef took the time to go to the army courts, to sit in their Beit Din, to watch what happens, and he came out with the following conclusion. The standards for conversion in the Israeli army are extremely low. But anyone who converts in those standards is halachically Jewish, and no one has the right to argue with this conversion. That didn't do well for Rabbi Ovadia. I remember that morning, it must have been a Thursday or Friday morning, I was walking to do my shopping in Shaar, the more religious neighborhood in Jerusalem, and there were posters all over Shaar saying, they didn't call him rabbi, Ovadia Yosef is an evil person who's making the impure pure, and whatever they write on these posters. And from that moment, the I don't like to use the word ultra-Orthodox, I'll just use the word that they prefer to be called. The Haredi Ashkenazi establishment was at a standstill and at a big fight with a Sephardic Haredi establishment. The Sephardim approving of these conversions, the Ashkenazim not approving of these conversions. That doesn't mean that there were not Ashkenazim and Sephardim on either side who agreed or disagreed, but those were the two main positions. And that was quiet for a while. The Reform movement got very excited about this. Very excited. Because remember, if you could lower the standards of conversion, then that means that maybe you could lower them enough that the rabbinate of Israel would lose their monopoly on conversions. Yeah? The monopoly of Israel, he knows, 11 o'clock, his mother's almost home. The monopoly on conversions would be lost, and perhaps now for the first time in the history of the state of Israel, Reform and conservative conversions could actually be accepted in a court of law in the state of Israel. So any bill that has to do with reforming conversion, even if it's not to the liking of the Reform or conservative movement, will always be backed in Israel by the Reform or conservative movement, which carries a lot of political and financial weight in the Israeli Knesset, because it's the hopes that as far as we can get it away from the hands of the chief rabbinate, it will be able to come closer to our hands. So that's what happens. There are a number of politicians that are either funded by this movement, or they're backed by their political agenda, which is, or even a religious agenda. There are religious Knesset members that are supporters of this bill that feel that this is a much needed reform to the conversion system in Israel. Today in the morning, the bill passed again, the second body of votes. And the chief rabbinate of Israel held an emergency meeting in which they announced that even if the state of Israel accepts these conversions, they refuse to accept these conversions because the state of Israel doesn't have the right to decide in the place of the chief rabbis who is a Jew and who is not a Jew. The Lithuanian Haredi rabbis from Bnei Brak in Yerushalayim put out a letter saying that if such a bill goes through, they will open up a Sefer Yuchsin, a book of lineage, in which they will say who is a Jew and who is not a Jew, and anyone not in this book will not be allowed into the community or be married into the community, or so on and so forth. Opponents or backers of the bill wrote back a letter saying it's not like you married anybody out of your community in the first place, so your threat is not such a good threat, because who cares? You don't marry converts in the first place. You didn't marry people outside your community in the first place. So what's your deal?
So with major communities wiped out across Poland, no graveyards left. I mean, there's one place I'm thinking of, they used the tombstones to pave a street and turn them all upside down.
Sure.
You can't read them. How do you know who is and who isn't a Jew? I mean, how would I prove that I'm a Jew? We don't know.
So you wouldn't have to prove that you're a Jew.
What? All I have to do is open my mouth? That's what Bill tells me. You don't have to say anything. They know you're Jewish when they open your mouth.
Here's the way it works.
I thought they could think I'm Italian.
We do have a concept in Judaism of a cheskat, the Jew. You're in the category of most definitely a Jew, meaning your parents had a ketubah or some kind of religious document where a rabbi said that they were Jewish. So we don't dig past your parents. So your parents, your mother.
I don't know. I never
Good
saw
for you.
that from my parents.
Well,
I don't have
it's good that you live in a country that doesn't make you have to prove anything, right?
I'm just saying. I mean, I never saw my parents. You know, Stella Paris from Bobroisk and Hyman Liebman from Slavovich.
Right.
So they got married, but it was an American marriage. You know, they didn't have.
Did they have a religious marriage?
I don't think so.
They didn't
Right.
have a
So
religious marriage?
again, if you were in the state of Israel right now, you might have problems proving or not proving your Judaism. I don't know the process that you'd have to go through for that. Yeah.
I think totally not
in
observant
Israel,
religious
it's
marriage.
entirely different than here
Either you
because you need more people in the military. This is an issue of getting.
Well, they're taking these people into the military. It's not a no. You can serve in the military without being Jewish. But to the question of, so are you halachically considered Jewish?
That's what I was going to say. I mean, if these people are ready to fight and die for Israel,
Right.
So we spoke about this last week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the chief.
Yeah.
That's what Hakam Ovadia.
That's what Rabbi Yosef said.
Yeah, but
if you're willing to give up your life for the Jewish people,
exactly.
that should count at least
So
towards
that's why
something
he said
of the
that's
being.
okay.
But that's only if you view fighting for the state of Israel as a noble Jewish cause. What if you are from this group of rabbis that says the state of Israel is good for nothing? Remember those? So then giving up your life for the Jewish state could even be worse than not doing it, right? Like it could be.
Correct.
You have to understand, all of this is based in the worldview from which you're coming. And it gets even more complicated. I'll see how you're. Yeah.
So in Rabbi Ovadia was
Oh,
saying that when he went to the bases and he looked at the procedures and he said, okay, it's not what I'm used to, but it's still halachically acceptable. So what is the, or do we know, what is like the base?
That is exactly what we're going to be studying today, because that is going to be the root of this whole debate.
Okay.
What is a Jew? What makes a person Jewish? What does a person need to go through to be considered a convert to Judaism? These are all very good questions. I'll tell you the truth is, most of you, when you read some of these things we're going to read together, will be very surprised at the things you're reading. Because much of what we spoke about last week, that Sephardic Ashkenazi divide in philosophy, not in ethnicity. In philosophy, most of us, myself included, have been educated for the majority of our life in a system which has only been taught one side of this picture. And therefore the other side of this picture will inevitably sound either crazy or way too liberal or way too fanatic. So we're going to do this together. I want to hand out this article. Everybody should take...
Is the criteria that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef used, is that accepted by all the rabbis, or is that what he determines, and different rabbis have different criteria?
Tell me which one topic in Judaism you take the top 4 papers until you see the Rabbi Kook and Rabbi Uziel again.
Okay.
Which topic in Judaism have we ever had all rabbis agree on?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so it's about
But I have a question. What right is the Israeli Knesset to debate this?
Because remember when we have a separation of church and state?
Yes.
There are bad things that come along with that, meaning there could be things that are against the church that will be passed in the state. But the church has no obligation towards the state, and the state has no obligation towards the church. That's the plus side of separation of church and state. Israel is a country that does not have a separation of church and state. It's a democracy that has no separation of church and state. And therefore, the Israeli Knesset is responsible for determining who is to be a Jew. And there's been a status quo of, okay, so we'll give that to the chief rabbinate to decide for us. But now, this bill says, who are the chief rabbinate to decide for us who is a Jew? And therefore, it's been a debate back and forth. But the modern day politics I don't care so much about, as much as I care about bringing here 2 sides of a coin, both of which are valid, but to say which solution is going to work for our generation, much of what I spoke about last week, it's not that either side here, one is right or one is wrong. Rather, every generation has to say which Torah is going to fit this generation. And I see so many people, they try to change things and all kinds of silly things, but they don't ever get to the real problems. They don't ever figure out, how do we transform Judaism? How do we take Judaism to a place where it's more moderate, where it's more normal, where it's more balanced? Instead, they try to change up small things in Judaism, but forgetting behind the big things. I'll give you an example. Any minute, it's going to be the Mashiach that walks through the door.
I think she's here now. So, we're just on the marriage thing, because I can't get past this. If you're married by a rabbi, do you always get a ketubah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so my parents must have thrown it out somewhere.
I don't know. I don't know where my parents is.
Yeah, but I know they were married by a rabbi. That was.
Paulette, I don't know where mine is.
Yeah.
So Paulette,
Some drops of water?
yeah, I don't know that he'll know what to do with it, but he could try. He doesn't know what
so
water
it's
is.
not like you have to show.
Normally what works, let's say you come from America. So, if you come from America, I do this all the time. I write a letter to the chief rabbinate saying I'm an Orthodox rabbi living in, and I vouch for this person that they're Jewish. It's become much more complicated recently due to this stronghold on the rabbinate. Now only certain rabbis in America are considered rabbis and other ones are not. It's a whole thing. For example, I have the right to convert somebody too, if I had the credentials. I'm in the middle of getting those. I study every day to get the credentials to do conversions. But would I actually convert somebody? I don't know on an ethical and moral level. Is it fair to convert somebody knowing that when they go to Israel they won't be considered Jewish? And so I, unfortunately, am forced. They force my hand to say, okay, so I'm going to have to pass this person on to the hands of people who I don't trust, the hands of people who I don't agree with, because that's going to be a universal conversion, and that's unfortunate. There was never a time in history where one Jewish group had a monopoly over all of Judaism. We always fought it out. We always had problems. We always had lack of agreement. But there was never like a chief rabbinate sitting in Israel that said, "Oh, I'm going to decide in America who's a rabbi, who's not a rabbi. I'm going to decide in Israel which Beit Din can convert, which Beit Din can't." You have to understand to the point where if the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he was alive, were to make Aliyah to Israel, he'd have to become recertified by the chief rabbinate to prove that he's actually a rabbi. But that's after he proves to them that he's really Jewish. Are you aware? That's what they have to bring his parents' ketubah into the office. That's what happens when there's no separation of church and state. On the other hand, it saved the state of Israel from a lot of very shady Jewish groups that are trying to do all kinds of things that are not within the traditional confines of Judaism. But let's share with you what we're saying here.
He's trying to talk.
It's true. Oh, he's sad though. I think he might want to walk around a little bit. Someone want to hold him.
Saying, I'm Jewish.
Yes, let's walk.
So there were two giant rabbis in the state of Israel, or beginning before the state of Israel, who were founders of the modern chief rabbinate of today. Put aside anything I told you about the chief rabbinate.
The two chief rabbis.
There are two chief rabbis in Israel, one Sephardic and one Ashkenazi.
That's right.
I'll explain to you the history behind both of them very briefly. There has been a Sephardic chief rabbinate in Israel for about 600 years. Because the Sephardic presence in Israel has always been there. Not true for the Ashkenazi presence. It's come and gone, come and gone. When Rabbi Kook made Aliyah to Israel at the request of the Chafetz Chaim, his rabbi, most people don't know that. The Chafetz Chaim said, go to Israel, establish a unified body of rabbis so that there'll be one standard in Israel. That way you can unify the Jewish communities living in Israel. Very different, by the way, than what the chief rabbinate of Israel does today. Rav Kook came to Israel and started on his plan to unify the Jewish people in Israel. As soon as they heard that Rav Kook was going to found a chief rabbinate, there were two camps. Those who liked him and those who opposed him. Those who opposed him being those, again I'm going to use the terms they prefer, the Haredi Ashkenazi rabbinate of Israel. Said, who are you? You're a modern, progressive, liberal rabbi. You like those secular Jews. You like Zionists. You like all those people. We can't have you as our chief rabbi. And they excommunicated Rav Kook.
Correct.
Even though he came from the same
place they came from.
Absolutely.
Rav Kook, and that's a whole world of politics, by the way, that exists until your local Orthodox synagogues today. Ask your rabbis how much they know about Rav Kook.
Nothing.
Exactly.
I'm already off.
Because they're still fighting that fight against Rav Kook.
Correct.
Rav Kook, who was a mainstream Ashkenazi rabbi from Lithuania.
Correct.
Mainstream. That's what the Chafetz Chaim sent him to Israel. Unfortunately, the mainstream changed and went against him. And when Rav Kook started as chief rabbinate, he said, listen, clearly I'm the new guy on the block. So how can I start a movement here without any support from the existing community? And so he had a meeting. The Ashkenazi community didn't want him. The Sephardic community said, listen, Rabbi Kook, you're very much in our ballpark. So we have a chief rabbinate. It's been here for 600 years. The truth is that we cannot fairly represent the Ashkenazi community because we don't have Ashkenazi rabbis in our rabbinate. So why don't we open up a joint rabbinate? You'll be the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, and we'll continue being the Sephardic chief rabbis. And that's what happened. They both joined forces, and the rabbi who was willing to work with Rav Kook was named Rabbi Ben Zion Meir Chai Uziel. Harav Uziel, the famous Rabbi Uziel. See those cream books on my shelf? Mm-hmm. To the right of them there's green books.
Yes.
Those green books were written by Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, the main student of Rabbi Uziel. So Rabbi Uziel and Rav Kook formed this partnership together, where they decided they were going to become the unified force in the state of Israel to help Jews grow together. And they were very successful. There were two chief rabbis that were very much loved by the Jewish community in Israel, and were unfortunately, because of their alliance, fought against by much of the mainstream establishment, who wasn't willing to accept that these two rabbis were greater than them, and didn't want to deal with their issues. Rabbi Angel decided to take these two rabbis who you would think are allies and agree on everything, and say, look, they were both partners that worked together, but both of them had very different values. And their very different values reflected into their halachic works. It reflected into their life. It reflected into the way they looked at the world. And that's a problem. A good problem and a bad problem. Because if a rabbi, you can't think that a rabbi is going to give you the same answer regardless of which rabbi you go to. Every rabbi, I wouldn't say tainted, but sees Judaism through the lens of where he grew up, the culture he came from, the Jewish theology or ideologies that he shares, and everyone will have a different answer using the same sources. So maybe we can read this part together. So I want to read the first part for us. There are two words on it. Halacha means anything legal in Jewish law. Hashkafa is anything philosophical or worldview related in Jewish law. You're going to see these two words come up a lot. Yeah, please.
When addressing a halakhic question, each posek, halakhic, decisive.
There are certain rabbis who are poskim.
Yes.
Rabbi Kook was a posek, Rabbi Uziel was a posek.
Attempts to arrive at a decision that is objectively true. The posek will study and analyze the available halakhic literature with the goal of understanding the halakha as clearly and accurately as possible. At the same time, halakhic literature is characterized by a variety of decisions regarding the same questions. Different posekim arrive at different conclusions, even though they generally rely on the same source literature. Sometimes these differences are based on alternate readings or interpretations of the source text. Or one posek may attribute greater authority to certain halakhists, while another may prefer to depend on others. Differences in local conditions, halakhic traditions, educational background, hashkafa, religious worldview, these and many other factors may also result in different decisions from different posekim.
Let's pause right here. So we agree on one thing. Every posek analyzes the same sources as another posek, hoping to come to an objective analysis of the halachic problem at hand. Can I do this on Shabbat? Well, two different rabbis will look at the same sources, and one will say yes, and one will say no, not because one wants the answer to be yes and one wants the answer to be no, but because they're both objectively analyzing the situation, and this is the conclusion which they reached. Now there are other factors that would tell a posek why you would go this way and why another posek would go that way, and that could be one of these three things. One, either based on alternate readings or different interpretations of a text. See, sometimes one person will look at a text and say, that's what the text is saying. Another rabbi says, no, the text is saying the exact opposite of what you think it's saying. And so then you have now created two different camps, both relying on the same text, that have two different opinions.
Correct.
That's assuming there's not going to be a third reading of this text, right? Now,
There will be.
that's one. The second way is, there are certain poskim that might attribute greater halachic authority to one previous posek than another one. For example, when I look at halakha, I will always give Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo, precedence over any other rabbi that ever lived. And so very often you'll find that my halachic rulings will almost always come directly into the ballpark of Rabbi Yosef Karo. Other rabbis, who for whatever reason don't consider Rabbi Yosef Karo to be the greatest rabbi who ever lived or the greatest halachic codifier that ever lived, will therefore have a different, they'll say, here's his opinion, but there's a different rabbi who argued with him. And this other rabbi has more influence in my world. And therefore, I'm going to choose like this rabbi over Rabbi Yosef Karo. That's reason number 2, why a rabbi or a posek would choose one direction over another direction. 3, local conditions. That means, let's say I want to say that this meat is not kosher, but I know that the conditions of my community are, they simply can't stand up to this financial pressure. That's influence enough for a rabbi to possibly look in other directions to find other sources that would permit such meat. Yeah? Or hashkafa, worldview, like we said about the army. If you view the army of the state of Israel as being a big mitzvah, then you inevitably will treat it as a mitzvah. Whereas someone whose worldview says it's not a mitzvah, it's not a big deal, he's going to look at the same halachic question, but weigh it in a very different way. And therefore, even though everyone tries to come to an objective analysis, it's almost impossible because of any of these things that may come and change that objective view. So, the interrelationship. Someone want to read this verse? Someone else?
Would someone else like to read?
The interrelationship of hashkafa and hashkalah may be illustrated in how two recent Pasakim, Rabbi Abraham Yitzchak Kook and Rabbi Benjamin Meir Uziel, dealt with issues involving the understanding of the nature of Jewish.
So what we are going to be talking about are a few issues that Rabbi Kook and Rabbi Uziel both dealt with, and you'll see how their worldview directly influenced the decisions they made. And this is all a follow-up to what I said last week. There's that Sephardic worldview and the Ashkenazi worldview. Sometimes they cross, sometimes they don't cross. But you have to be aware that they both exist, they're both valid, but they both will lead a person to very different conclusions. Because one view is directly opposed to the other view. And therefore, even though that's a hashkafik, it's a worldview issue, so what does it have to do with halachic text? It influences the way you look at halakha. Rabbi Kook, we're going to read a little bit about their backgrounds.
Rabbi Kook, 1865 to 1935, was born in Latvia and studied at the yeshiva of Volozhin. In 1904, he emigrated to Israel, where he became the chief rabbi of Jaffa. In 1919, he was appointed as the Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Jerusalem, and in 1921, he became the first Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
Rabbi Uziel, 1880 through 1953, was born in Jerusalem and studied under the Torah scholars of the city, including his own father, Rabbi Yosef Raphael Uziel, who is the Av Bet Din Chief Justice of the Sephardic community. In 1911, Rabbi Uziel became Chief Rabbi of Jaffa, where he worked closely with Rabbi Kook. In 1921, he became Chief Rabbi of Salonika. In 1923, he returned to Israel to serve as Chief Rabbi of Tel Aviv. And in 1939, he became Rishon LeZion, the Sephardic Chief Rabbi of Eretz Yisrael.
So these are the historical backgrounds. These are two guys, two brilliant Torah scholars that carry a lot of weight. For Sfaradim, Rav Uziel is as mainstream of a rabbi as you can ever find. This is one of our giants, Rabbi Uziel. Rav Kook, also, you could say the same thing for the Ashkenazi community. If it wasn't for the fact that there were great groups of people who didn't like the way Rav Kook viewed the world, and therefore fought with him on a personal level, that's probably why you don't know so much about him. But for us, Rav Kook and Rabbi Uziel are two giants. When you look at the writings of Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, the student of Rabbi Uziel, he refers to his rabbi as Mori v'Rabbi, my master and my rabbi, and he refers to Rav Kook as Maran Harav, our master, the teacher. Meaning, he considered both of them to be his rabbis, even though he was a direct student of Rabbi Uziel, because those worlds were very close, even though they disagreed on many things.
I have a question. So let's say someone is doing a pasuk, they're looking at the halakha, the conversion in Israel, back and forth, and they're going to look at the Sephardic decision-making, I'm going to use that terms, and the Ashkenazic decision-making. Do they go back past Rabbi Kook, further back?
Sure, we go back about 1,000 years before both of
We'll
these.
go back 1,000 years. We'll go back that.
Until that divide of Sephardic and Ashkenazi.
Okay.
And that divide almost always exists, not just because of geographic differences, because both communities view different source texts, which are unanimous. I mean, they're agreed on. They're the common denominator between both groups, but interpret them very differently.
So is it kind of like, I guess I'm trying to understand this, is it kind of like an American system of law where a lawyer is trying a case here, and in order to make his point, he needs to go back into previous cases and how those have been ruled. And he may go back, for 150 years and come up with a case that was tried in, 1840.
It's exactly what it is. You're allowed innovation in Jewish thought. Just your innovation is much better off when it has a precedent in Jewish law that backs it up. Because then you can say, listen, it's not me. I'm showing you previous cases where such people wrote things and they made sense then, so why won't they make sense now? Okay. Okay.
Maybe he's hungry.
Sorry.
He probably is, but
Sounds like.
someone might call my wife and just ask me where she is. I'll give you my phone.
Is there a bottle?
There is, but until you heat it up, she could already be home. Here. It's dialing, so we can just ask her.
Thank you. But despite these external similarities, their attitudes...
Both Rabbi Kook. You missed the paragraph.
Okay, both Rabbi Kook and Rabbi Uziel were strong advocates of religious Zionism. They were outstanding communal leaders, teachers, and scholars. Both were prolific writers who made major contributions in the fields of halakha and hashkafa.
So they were both strong advocates of the same philosophies, and they were big contributors to both of these fields. Not just halakha and not just worldview, but both. But
But despite these external similarities, their attitudes towards several vital issues are radically different. Their disparate understandings of the nature of Jewish peoplehood are manifested in a number of their halakhic decisions.
What is a Jew? That is going to come to the root of many of these problems. If you know what a Jew is, then you'll now know what it takes to make someone else a Jew, right? If your definition of a Jew is very lofty and abstract, it'll take a lot of work to make somebody who's not Jewish a Jew. If your definition of a Jew is a certain lifestyle or a certain worldview, if a person takes on that lifestyle or worldview, it will be much easier to make them Jewish, right? So we're going to look at two mainstream poskim who lived at the same time, worked together, and reached two very different conclusions regarding Judaism. Let's turn to page 2. Rabbi Engel is going to take us...
Rabbi Kook is older.
Rabbi Kook is older than Rabbi Uziel.
He also, I didn't realize that he actually never saw the state of Israel.
Rabbi Kook never saw the state of Israel.
Right.
Rabbi Uziel did.
Right.
Sure, Rabbi Kook died well before the state of Israel.
Right, which is very interesting.
Which is why the students of Rabbi Kook, the students of Rabbi Kook split into two different camps. Those who said, listen, our rabbi was a Zionist until the state of Israel, and then he wouldn't have approved of this. And someone said, no, that's ridiculous to say. Rav Kook was a Zionist, and in spite of what you're seeing in the state of Israel, he would definitely still hold on to his horses, and they transferred those teachings to the modern state of Israel. Page 2. Conversion. This is a...
What's today's who would you identify as following the first one today?
In Rav Kook? Some of his family members that are a little bit more Haredi than the others.
What camp did they belong to?
Today, the more Haredi camp. You also have students of Rav Kook who disagree that Rav Kook's son should be his successor. Like Haramor, the name of the yeshiva, Rabbi Tau, who he was also a student of Rav Kook, a very old rabbi, and he said Rav Kook's son got it wrong. And that's a big allegation to make, especially since Rav Kook says I'm passing my baton on to my son. Okay, right now we're dealing with just Rav Kook, before anything else happened after his life. So conversion might not seem like such a big issue to you, but I promise you that the things you're going to read in these paragraphs, you either will know about, not know about. You might not believe some of the things here. Some of the things here you might say, wow, that actually makes a lot of sense, and that might actually fit my worldview a lot more than what everyone else is telling me a conversion means. So let's look at this together.
Let us begin with a discussion of how they dealt with the question of conversion to Judaism. How does a non-Jew enter the Jewish fold? What is the nature of the Jewishness which the convert accepts? Rabbi Kook and Rabbi Uziel studied the same Talmudic and rabbinic sources. That their rulings were diametrically opposed to each other reflects their different
Hashkafot, worldviews.
Okay, thank you. Their different understanding of the nature of Jewish peoplehood. Both dealt with the serious problem of what to do with individuals who requested conversion to Judaism, even when it was believed that the converts were not likely to observe all of the mitzvot.
Put a period right there. Ding, 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 ding. Today's modern question. What do you do with the person who wants to convert? Not because they fell in love with the Jewish religion, they want to keep all the mitzvot in the Torah. They say, listen, I fell in love with a Jewish girl, so I'll do whatever it takes to get by. Because you know what? If that person doesn't have to keep kosher, and doesn't have to keep Shabbat, doesn't have to do whatever it is, and they're still Jewish because they were born that way, so why can't I be Jewish, become Jewish, and live my life the same way that traditional Jew lives their life, even though they're not what you would call an observant Jew?
But it works the same way with a woman then.
Both ways. Either way.
Because regardless of how we look at non-observant Jews, there's still halachic.
So the question: why can't I convert? Why do I have to convert to be an observant Jew? Why can't I convert to be a non-observant Jew, just a Jew?
Yeah. I always thought you could.
No, because there is
can I tell you how many couples? How many couples I know?
Where the woman converts because the man
that's going to go down to what you consider a Jew. Is a Jew really a Jewish thing, or is it a cultural thing? And here I'll tell you what I mean. You know how many couples I've seen come to convert? She converts because she wants to marry him, and he won't marry somebody who's not Jewish because his mother will be angry at him.
Correct.
Yeah. So he ends up putting her through the conversion system, and while she's learning all this good stuff for conversion, she gets turned on to Judaism all the way. And now she wants to do Shabbat and kosher, and she wants to cover her hair and light candles and whatever else she wants to do. And the guy says, "Hold your horses. I wanted you just to be Jewish enough for my mother. My mother doesn't even do that stuff. I don't want to marry you anymore."
Oh, dear.
And
It's happened.
It happens all the time.
I remember a friend. They were married and they got divorced because she was very religious for him. She converted like that, and she was upset with him because he was not on time for lighting candles. He was not on time for he was not keeping kosher.
Let me give you a much more realistic scenario. Let's say here, and this doesn't happen in America so much, but let's say here, unfortunately, here you have a big problem of assimilation, intermarriage. So let's say that you've done all you can to try to dissuade this couple from staying together. You don't listen. He's not Jewish. She's not Jewish. Whatever it is, but they're still set on they're going to stay together till the end. And you see that they're not going anywhere. Let's say they even have a kid together, and now that kid's not Jewish because his mother wasn't Jewish. So what do you do? What do you do with this guy?
the kid can become Jewish on its own.
Sure.
Right.
That, nobody's taking that away from them.
The child can still have.
There are a few questions that come up.
Absolutely.
Does this kid, when he wants to convert, let's say when he finishes college and goes on birthright, does he have any special privileges when it comes to converting because his father was Jewish?
No.
Or is he a non-Jew like every other non-Jew?
I have a question.
By the way, I'll tell you that, well, by the way, let's first figure out the problem.
Well,
These 2 volumes of books were written by a good friend of mine. All of these are sources that there's something called Zera Yisrael. Something called, you're not Jewish, but you're a descendant of a Jew. In which case, rabbinic courts should treat you much lighter and much easier and work much more closely with you to help you convert to Judaism just because your father is Jewish, even though that has no bearing on your Judaism whatsoever.
Would
2 volumes of sources.
Would that apply to these Russians that come?
Absolutely. Oh, ding, ding, ding. Oh, see where we're going with this? Watch where we're going. We're going somewhere great over here. So now, according to these 2 volumes, and then a 3rd volume that he recently put out, those rabbis that are converting people should say, well, there are 2 kinds of non-Jews who convert. Those who are converting, 1, because they fell in love with Judaism, 2, because they fell in love with somebody Jewish, 3, because they're the child or the spouse of somebody Jewish already. Now the child is, you'd probably feel much more compassion towards the child than the spouse. Why the spouse? Why should it be so easy to convert the spouse? Tell me.
The child can, you can convert the child before he turns 12.
Right.
12 and the boy 13.
But tell me about this. Tell me about this. Why?
If they're already living a Jewish life.
They're not really living a Jewish life. They're living like a traditional Jewish life. I don't like Hanukkah candles. Would you say that it's the rabbinic court's responsibility to maybe help this guy out in the sense that let's convert his wife for him. That way at least he's not married to a non-Jew. He's married to somebody Jewish. Or is that not my problem? He got involved with her. Why do I have to lower my standards of conversion? Because she'll say, I'll do it. Okay, I'll do it. I'll make you happy. I don't really care. I'll light candles for you. But don't expect me to keep Shabbat. Don't expect me to keep kosher. I'll do the Hanukkah thing with you. I'll buy presents for our kids, right? But I don't want to be so committed and involved. Do you lower your standard of conversion for such people?
No.
Or do you say, tough, listen, Judaism is a tough religion. We've got rules, we've got standards, we've got laws, and okay, you don't want to work hard. Fine, you 2 are adults, you made a decision to live together. That's not our problem.
I have a different
Once you
point of
lower
view.
the bar,
I think you do lower your standards.
where do you stop?
Oh, that's also true. Yeah?
I think you lower your standards because that couple is going to have children. And that you're basically saying that little unborn baby can never be Jewish because you didn't allow the mother to convert. So that baby that boy is not going to be circumcised. That boy is not going to.
But why do we need to be more concerned about the fate of their child than the parents themselves? Right?
Because I think a father counts.
Because
I think a father counts.
I'm not saying he's not.
I don't think he counts more than the woman.
But if he cared enough
about his Jewishness, he wouldn't marry a non-Jew to begin with. So what I'm saying is that they lowered their standards. Why do I need to lower mine to accommodate?
Avril's bobbing her head over here. I want to hear it. What are you thinking?
I, as far as conversion is concerned, I actually went through this with my daughter, my youngest daughter. I did it through the marriage because my husband was married to somebody who wasn't Jewish, and she had a conservative conversion, and they didn't ever light candles on Friday night, and he didn't even know that there was such a thing as Shabbat. And when I heard all this, I was so upset, you have no idea. So I went to the Lubavitch, and I managed to organize the conversion of our daughter. Because once I'm married to her father, she's mine. And
How long did it take? Can I ask?
Yes, it took us nearly 2 years.
Right.
It took me nearly 2 years, and I want to tell you, she went on a regular basis to Rabbi Sherman Schroger, who taught her as much as I know today. And she came home and we worked together, and he came to my house for 3 years to make Richard understand where I was coming from and where he was coming from.
What do you do then with a kid that doesn't want to work that hard?
And is she leading a Jewish life now?
Believe it or not,
marry somebody Jewish.
No, but believe me, you're 100% correct. But she goes to shul on Friday nights, and she lights her candles, and she went on Rosh Hashanah. And
I like to keep this. I like to keep this in a.
Marry someone Jewish.
Let's leave it in a theoretical realm here. In theory, that conversion took a long time though to make happen.
That is correct.
Right.
And that is, and I remember we got these 3 Lubavitcher rabbis that came from Crown Heights to a special mikvah in Allentown in Pennsylvania. The most beautiful mikvah I've ever seen in somebody's private home.
I'm surprised because Lubavitch doesn't usually do conversions.
They do outside of certain communities. Like in Europe, Chabad does conversions.
Oh yes, they do.
No, not here, not in California.
No.
Wow.
Again, out of a desire, not because they're not licensed to do conversions. Again, because it always comes to the question: is it ethical for me to convert somebody that somebody else isn't going to appreciate their conversion?
That is correct.
And so they always vote to let's opt out and let someone else do it, even though we would rather do it ourselves. That's a noble move on an ethical level.
There's another problem with converting a child is a lot of restrictions or requirements and demands that the rabbinical court poses on the parents, on the house. The child who is converting has to live in a home where the home is enabling him to
yes,
practice Judaism.
provided the child is under the age of 12, where she has a right to be able to learn for herself, where she hasn't got the transport or anything to take a fetch and carry her all the way and do everything.
Marlene,
Absolutely.
you wanted to say something?
I just had a general comment.
Yes.
So, I don't have any answers, obviously, but it seems to me that you can't keep lowering the standards and breaking the rules and bending things every time a new situation comes up. But also, if you just say, too bad, it's his responsibility, you're pushing away so many Jewish people.
So these are both sides of the coin.
Yes.
Right.
These are both sides of the coin. And one side of the coin doesn't necessarily reject the other side of the coin. They just simply feel that my side of the coin is more important than your side of the coin is.
But in today's world, when you have such a huge intermarriage rate and people are feeling so disenchanted...
Is that the solution, though, to start converting everybody?
No, I don't have a solution. I'm just saying you just can't say, okay, it's not my responsibility.
So that's also not the solution. The solution is also not to say, okay, forget about all you. You're eternally lost to us.
No, you
So let's keep reading this paragraph. So for the most part,
Rabbi Kook was adamant.
no, for the most part.
Even if a convert followed the technical procedure.
No, we're in the middle of a paragraph. For the most part.
here for the most part, such
Yeah.
converts were interested in Gerut conversion for the sake of marrying a Jewish person and were not motivated by theological concerns. Obviously, neither Rav Kook or Rabbi Uziel thought that such converts represented the ideal. On the contrary, everyone would agree that it was preferable for converts to choose to join the Jewish people from a belief in the truth of Judaism and a total commitment to observe the mitzvot. However, a great many converts do not come with these ideal credentials.
Let's pause right here. There are two terms that we have to know. In Hebrew we call them haratzui v'hamatzui. That which is desired, ratzui. That's what we would love the world in an ideal world you'd like it to be. In matzui, practically speaking though, what does our world look like? Ideally we would love that every convert that comes to rabbinic court to say, listen, I spent the last 20 years studying theology of this religion and that religion, and I'm convinced that Hashem is one and Judaism is the only way, and I want to be a student of Moshe Rabbeinu and a son of Avram Avinu. Yeah, but that doesn't always happen that way. That's not always the candidate that's standing in front of the rabbinic court. So what do you do with such a candidate? Let's first see Rav Kook's stance. Rav Kook's stance is directly opposed to Rav Uziel's stance, but Rav Kook's stance is today's Orthodox stance on conversion. Rav Kook's stance, and I'm a big Rav Kook fan, except for in certain areas of halakha. I'll tell you what I've noticed in Judaism is as follows. I'm thinking of putting it in my book now, but I'm not sure that I've fully figured it out to be able to write it down on paper yet. They say, the Kotzker Rebbe said, not everything you think you have to say, not everything you say you have to write, and not everything you write you have to publish. There's different levels. Some people, they should know that. No one's had a student who said, Rabbi, I don't have a filter between here and here. It's like, it all comes out. It's a dangerous way to live your life. But my theory for right now is, those rabbis that were very, I'm talking about mainstream Jewish rabbis, not those who took deliberate directions off course, but those who were considered in the mainstream of rabbinic Judaism, that were very open-minded, if you'd like to call that, very liberal, very open to change in Jewish law, were almost always not the same in their worldview. They were very conservative and traditional in their worldview. The rabbis who were very conservative and traditional in their halachic context seem to always be very liberal and open-minded in their philosophy. Rav Kook being a great example of that. Rav Kook was a very open-minded rabbi, but when it comes to his halachic rulings, is stricter than all the rest of them. Rav Uziel, or many Sephardic rabbis for that matter, are very conservative and traditional in the way they look at the world, but are very open-minded and liberal when it comes to their halachic rulings. Perhaps it could be that one anchors down the other one. That because I'm so conservative in my halachic rulings, nobody will suspect me of not being traditional, and therefore I can have the freedom of thought. It could be that that's where that comes from. Here, though, you're going to see something interesting. Here, the worldview is directly influencing the halakha. And here you'll find that Rav Kook's worldview about Judaism, and this is the mainstream worldview in the Jewish community today, and I'll repeat, this is the opinion of the Haredi, Ashkenazi, Lithuanian faction of Jewry that has somehow managed to become the mainstream over the rest of Jews all over the world. To the point where even Jews that are not so traditional are buying into it. Whereas the Sephardic worldview perhaps even represents many more rabbis than does this view, but is today considered sidelined and not mainstream. But let's first see Rav Kook, because the things that Rav Kook says, even if they may stir up some raw emotions in you, are the mainstream of Jewish thought today. Rabbi Kook, someone read this paragraph for me.
Rabbi Kook was adamant in his opposition to accepting converts who did not accept to observe all the mitzvot. Even if a convert followed the technical procedure for conversion but lacked the absolute intention to observe the mitzvot, his conversion is not valid. When the Talmud states,
even if he jumps through all the hoops, does everything right, but his mind is, don't worry, as soon as I get past this rabbinic court, I'm dropping it all. He doesn't ever say it, but he does. According to Rav Kook, that person is not a convert, not Jewish. Okay, when the Talmud
states, Yevamot 24b, that Kulam Gerim Hem, they are all converts, this passage refers to individuals who convert for the sake of marriage or because of other external factors. This refers only to those who did have the intention to accept the mitzvot in full.
So Rav Kook says, listen, the Talmud in Yevamot says that anybody who converts is a convert. And they're all halachically valid. So no, that only means that if their intentions were in the right place when they did it, then they're halachically valid. So you have a base text that seems to be saying the opposite of Rav Kook is saying, but Rav Kook is reading it to say whatever he wants it to say, because that's the way you interpret Jewish law. Sorry, rabbis.
Rabbis who accept for conversion those candidates who come for worldly reasons but who will not fulfill the mitzvot are making an error. Much evil will befall such rabbis. They are guilty of bringing thorns into the house of Israel.
Period. Here's Rav Kook's halachic stance. There's no such thing as a half Jew. There's no such thing as a quarter Jew. A Jew who stands in front of the rabbinic court and says, I'm not going to be observant of all the mitzvot. I'm not going to believe in all the tenets of Jewish faith. He's not Jewish, says Rav Kook. I don't care if they put him in a mikvah and they did a brit milah to him. He's not Jewish. And a rabbi who accepts such converts, today would be dubbed, let's say, a reform rabbi, right?
Yes.
That rabbi is evil, and he's bringing thorns into the house of Israel, and his converts are not even Jewish. Let's read the next paragraph about Rav Kook. Someone else? Rav Kook.
Rabbi Kook argues that rabbis who accept such converts are transgressing the prohibition of Lifnei Iver, placing a stumbling block in the path of a blind person. By extension, this prohibition includes acts of misleading others.
How is he misleading them?
Because it makes them think that they're Jewish.
He's misleading the convert and thinking that they're Jewish, and he misleads who else?
Anybody else?
Anybody else who thinks that this convert is Jewish. Keep going.
If the conversions are not halachically valid, then the rabbis are misleading the Jewish public by calling such individuals Jews when in fact they are not Jewish. Such negligence will lead to many problems, including possible intermarriage. On the other hand, if these individuals are to be considered valid converts, then the rabbis are misleading them by not stressing how they will be subject to punishment for violating the mitzvot.
Okay. So Rav Kook says, listen, it's an all or nothing package over here. Do you want to become Jewish? The person who was born Jewish, okay, so they're struggling right now with their Judaism. You can't join the Jewish people struggling with the Jewish people. You just can't do it. It doesn't work that way. You can't come here for any ulterior motives. This is probably what you've heard about conversion in your whole life, in the Jewish religious community. I'm again not talking about deliberate offshoots of the Jewish community that have changed the standards for conversion. Okay. And another response. Someone else. Please.
In another response, the Rabbi Kook again emphasizes that converts who do not commit themselves to keep the mitzvot should not be accepted. If unqualified individuals,
Hedyotot is the word.
accepted them, no rabbi should perform weddings for them, even after they've been converted in this way. And happy is the one who stands in the breach to guard the purity of Israel. May a good blessing come to him. Amen.
So that's Rav Kook. Hedyotot, by the way, the chief rabbinate of Israel would consider any body that is not authorized by them to do conversions as hedyotot, unlicensed individuals. The hedyotot that you hear is an Aramaic word that comes from Greek that's directly related to the word idiot. Is a person who's an ignoramus. They're not even a rabbi. They're not even licensed to do conversions, but they decide they're going to convert someone anyways. Says Rav Kook that anyone who marries such, they perform the ceremony for such a convert, is violating the purity of Israel, and someone who stands against that should have a good blessing come to them.
I have a question. What if when they're converting, like you said, they commit and they say, I will do, and then they don't?
Do they intend to?
Who knows?
I'm asking you, in your question, did they intend to and they just weren't able to live up to it afterwards?
No.
I heard one.
No. So what did they try? They didn't mean.
They're trying to convert.
So according to Rav Kook, that conversion is invalid. The person's not Jewish.
But the rabbis don't know that this person is not.
Nobody can know what's going on in a person's heart, which is why they drag out this process for so long. The whole point of this process. Have you ever heard that when someone comes to convert, you're supposed to push them away a number of times?
Yes, 3 times.
I want to see which Jewish source you find that in.
I know, but it happens. Is there a source?
I don't know, Lubavitch said 3 times.
No, everyone says. That's not just Lubavitch. Everyone says.
There is a source for it? I don't know.
You're saying it doesn't exist anywhere.
What I'm saying is, it's like another
It's an
hoop
idea.
that they make people jump through.
Yeah.
It's another hoop. Does it have validity in Jewish sources? I don't know. Let me ask you a question. Well, let's wait this for Rabbi Uziel. But just keep this question in the back of your mind. Our mother, Ruth, Which rabbinic court did she wait 2 years outside of to convert to?
Yes, she was a convert.
Yeah, but which court?
So was divorced.
How long was that process for her?
She just said, "My people are your people."
I don't know, how long? What's,
It wasn't a long process.
how many rabbis were sitting on that rabbinic court?
Just Boaz.
Do you know why there are certain groups of Judaism
No, but
that...
her mother-in-law tried to dissuade her.
Yeah, okay. How much?
Yeah, a little
Quite
bit.
a bit. She said, it's going to be
One
very
person?
hard. It's
Well,
We say the same thing to convert.
Of course.
whole book written
Yeah.
about that one.
But let me share with you. Are you aware that there are some Jews who don't study Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, because their Judaism of 2014 doesn't match up with the Judaism of Tanakh, and therefore they'd be very afraid to be teaching people Tanakh, because what happens when you suddenly find stories in Tanakh that go against everything your rabbi is telling you? In which case, we'd rather teach people other things. For Rabbi Kook, then, someone reads this.
Then the acceptance of mitzvah is the essential ingredient in Jewishness. One who does not accept to observe the mitzvah simply cannot become part of the Jewish people, even if he or she were to go through the technical rituals of conversion. And even if one were to find halachic justification to validate these conversions, we should not allow such converts to marry Jews.
Says Rav Kook, don't even try. Don't even try to lower the standards here. It's not going to work for you. Because we will tell you, we're not accepting them as Jews. We have standards. The standards is you become an observant Jew like every other convert in our history, supposedly. That's
But
what
I have another question. What if you really sincerely want to become Jewish and you go through the conversion and then, life is long and a lot of things happen, but you don't keep all the mitzvahs?
According to Rav Kook, that person's Jewish. Because at the time of conversion, they were very sincere.
Okay.
They were coming in. Even according to Rav Kook, that's what the Talmud means when it says everyone is a convert. Because it's a sincere person. Does this sound different than anything you've ever heard of before when it comes to conversion?
So what if a man converts to Judaism because he marries a Jewish wife, and they have children, and they go through life, and they marry their kids, and they do this and that. And as they get older, they are both jointly interested in being more and more religious. And so they go more and more to synagogue, they get more and more involved, and they're even hanging out in an Orthodox synagogue. And
Freudian
the
slip.
rabbi there knows this man's history, that 25 years ago he converted to Judaism, and they consider that's not kosher enough for them. So even though they're members of the community, etc., 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 he doesn't get to have an aliyah at the bima. He doesn't get to hold the Torah at Simchas Torah. It's a unspoken slight, and yet here's a man who's like can't tell the difference between any one of your husbands and him.
This
But some rabbi
this happens all the time, which is why we're studying this. Now we still haven't. We're not even gonna get there today.
It's a shanda.
It is a shanda.
Well,
I think it's a shanda,
wait about the
but some
shanda.
rabbis don't think it's a shanda. They think he's not pure enough.
Let's look over here for a second. We're first going to see both sides of the coin, and then we're going to analyze their reasoning for coming to this. And you're going to see that their reasoning is based on their worldview. For Rav Kook, becoming a Jew seriously means accepting all the mitzvot and a bunch of other things. Let's see what Rabbi Uziel has to say. I want to get through that today. That way next week when we meet, we can go through the reasoning behind both of their opinions. And I'm not ignoring your question, but the answer to your question will become much clearer as we go through this.
I was just going to say, and I know this is weird, if the rabbis have the power to make the decision who is or is not Jewish based on their level of mitzvot, can they take someone like me who clearly is Jewish but doesn't have the level of mitzvot they would approve of in certain ways, even though I'm a very good person, could they take Jewishness away from me?
No.
No, never. Never.
See, once you're in, you're in.
That's it.
Now, there's something wrong with that. I think once you're in, you're in. You could be.
If you're pickable, you're in. It's your choice to go out of it.
You're born Jewish.
I know, and yet they give someone who has come into it and does more mitzvot than me a kibosh and wouldn't let him hold the Torah.
That's right.
So here you have
there's
it.
something
Here
wrong.
you're going to discuss. We're going to see this all inside.
All
No,
right.
I think would be shooting ourselves in the foot if we didn't get there.
Okay, all right.
Isn't it, to me, this is where the saying, Where there's two Jews, there's three opinions.
Absolutely.
Two Jews to what?
Three opinions. Yes.
Let me figure out how to pause for 1 second. Which one's pause? Rabbi Uziel.
Also wrote a number of responses
So now this is the opposite of Rav Kook.
dealing with the would-be converts whose commitment to observance of mitzvot was deficient, while acknowledging that it was most desirable that convicts accept all the mitzvot. Rabbi Uziel noted that in our times many individuals seek conversion for the sake of marriage. Instead of disqualifying such conversions, however, Rabbi Uziel actually encouraged them.
Underline the
He
next
felt
sentence.
that it was necessary for us to be stringent in matters of intermarriage, i.e., we should do everything possible to prevent a situation where marriage involves a Jew and a non-Jew. If we can convert the non-Jewish partner to Judaism, then we have preserved the wholeness of that family for the Jewish people. And we can hope that their children will be raised as Jews. Given the choice of having an intermarried couple or performing such a conversion, Rabbi Uziel ruled that it is better to perform the conversion. He, of course, believed that rabbis should do everything in their power to break off the projected intermarriage. They should resort to conversion only when it is clear that the couple would not be dissuaded from marriage to each other.
Pause right there. Have you ever heard this opinion before?
Yeah. No, never.
Remember I told you last week about Sfaradim and Ashkenazim?
Yes.
And I told you this is not an ethnic divide. I'm not trying to put a slice down the Jewish people and say there are people who come from these countries, people who come from those countries, this is better, this is worse.
No.
Rather, there are two worldviews. And I believe very much that we do the Jewish community a disservice. We pretend that there's only one worldview, and the other one is just, I don't know, it's like a different culture. They don't eat gefilte fish, whatever. That's the extent of being Sephardic. And it's not true. See, Sephardim are disagreeing here with the mainstream establishment on the very definition of what it takes to become Jewish.
Correct.
And they're not coming from a reform agenda or from a conservative agenda, but from a history of 2,000 years of Sephardic rabbis who upheld this opinion. As you know, someone asked me today, like, are you Orthodox? I have no idea what to answer that question. I don't know what to answer. I'll tell you, because if Orthodox means what I'm seeing in America today, which is a Eastern European-led rabbinate that doesn't even have knowledge about the Sephardic traditions and teachings and rulings of our rabbis, then absolutely not, I'm not Orthodox. But I'm hoping for a world where both are aware, both are known about, and sometimes you have to choose to go this way over that way. Because both of them are valid in different places and different communities. We're still not there yet.
I mean, it's not really part of this discussion. I'm just so curious why the Haredim kind of got so much power. It's just, how did this suddenly one overpower the other one when both kind of originally just developed in different areas?
Let's go one step more than that.
In
Remember I told you that the Sephardic...
They offered free services.
Remember I told you that Sephardic tradition's worst enemy is going to be... I told you this last week? Sephardim themselves. Because I can tell you that I can count on my hands how many other Sephardic rabbis still exist in the world that uphold these opinions. Because they've been boycotted by the other, or they've been overruled or absorbed, integrated into a worldview that is not Sephardic.
Correct. In some, I want to say, I've read somewhere that in some cases where Rabbi Kook wanted to keep the differences between the ethnic groups in Israel, Rabbi
Uziel was against it.
Wanted to actually create like a one Jew and wanted to.
Absolutely. That was Rabbi Uziel's whole approach. Bichlal, I'll tell you, I don't blame, I told this to my wife the other week, I don't blame Ashkenazim for not continuing Sephardic tradition. I mean, it's not their tradition to continue. I blame the Sfaradim for abandoning ship and saying, oh, let's jump over there because they're going to accept us more if we look more like them, dress more like them, study more like them, think more like them, speak. And that's the problem. But let's keep reading Rabbi Uziel. We have a few more minutes on the clock. Just a few more minutes. In another response, someone else.
In another response, Rabbi Uziel explains that the obligation of rabbis is to inform candidates for conversion of some, not all, of the mitzvot.
So a rabbi, when to convert someone, has to tell somebody some of the mitzvot in the Torah, not all of the mitzvot in the Torah. By the way, that says it straightforward in the Shulchan Aruch. Modi'im lo k'tzat mitzvot kalot v'k'tzat mitzvot chamurot. You tell them some of the stricter mitzvot and some of the lighter mitzvot. That's what the Rambam says. That's what the Talmud says. It doesn't say that they spent 2 years in a conversion process, 10 years in a conversion. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that.
Wait, and was Rabbi Kook in this opinion?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Now keep going. It is impossible.
Horrifying, though. I didn't think it-
Bet you can keep going.
Okay, and
It is
they
impossible.
put the quotes there. It is impossible for a Beit Din to know with certainty that any convert will keep all the mitzvot. Conversion, even initially, does not require that the convert accept to observe all the mitzvot. Indeed, the procedure of informing a non-Jew about the basic beliefs and mitzvot is required initially. But if this procedure were not followed and the non-Jew was converted ritually, circumcision and ritual immersion, without such information, the conversion is valid notwithstanding. And they give the
Anybody else reading what I'm reading? Why is nobody falling out of their chairs right now? I'm telling you, the most mainstream Sephardic rabbi in that generation. This is what he's writing. And he's not coming with any agenda. He's simply stating the way we have always been studying halakha. That's the way. This is the way we convert people. To the point where the Rambam says, what happens if a Beit Din says we don't want to convert somebody? And he goes and gets himself a Brit Milah. And he jumps into a mikveh when they're walking by the mikveh. Look, I converted! Is he Jewish?
That's what he says.
Says the Rambam, he is. He is.
That's amazing. That is
Yeah, but you
amazing.
lived at a time where who would want to be Jewish? With all the crusaders and
Let's just finish the opinion of Rabbi Uziel. Someone else read this opinion for us. Rabbi Uziel concludes.
Rabbi Uziel concludes that it is permissible.
Now pause. He has a little bit of chutzpah because he's a Sephardic rabbi. Not just is it permissible, but it is also
A mitzvah.
And a mitzvah to accept such converts, even when it is expected that they would not observe all the mitzvot. Our hope is that they will come to observe the mitzvot in the future. We are obligated to give them this opportunity. If they fail to observe the mitzvot, the iniquity is on their own shoulders, not ours. Rabbi Uziel rejects the argument that since a vast majority of converts do not observe the mitzvot, we should not accept converts at all. On the contrary, he argues that it is a mitzvah to accept these converts. We are obligated not only to do these conversions to prevent intermarriage, but we have a special responsibility to the children who will be born of these marriages. Since they are of Jewish stock,
Zera Yisrael, Jewish. Zera Yisrael, Jewish stock.
even if only one parent is Jewish, they should be reclaimed for our people. Rabbi Uziel.
I want to read this to you. Rabbi Uziel writes is a direct quote from his letter. And I fear that if we push them, the children, away completely by not accepting their parents for conversion, we shall be brought to judgment, and they shall say to us, the verse from Yechezkel, you did not bring back those who were driven away, and those who were lost you did not seek. Says Rabbi Uziel, I'm afraid that if I don't accept these people back in, and I don't pave a road for them to re-enter the Jewish people, I am going to be guilty of turning away hundreds and thousands of Jews from joining the Jewish fold.
But other people would say he's lowering his standards. We would say he's lowering his
A lot of people would say, the mainstream community would say, well, that's not even Jewish. Now, again, this is a very...
How do you prevent people who are really,
Sure. But this is a very theoretical discussion for the very simple reason that here we're not discussing, so what are those few mitzvot that they do have to do, right? What are those few things that you do have to tell them about? We're not discussing here the details. What we are discussing here is a general concept. Rav Kook is saying the bar is up here. You don't want to get over the bar, you don't want to lift yourself there, Okay, that's fine. We don't force people to convert to Judaism, but don't expect me to go out of my way to cater to your needs to be a Jew that's not following Judaism. But, says Rabbi Uziel, Rav Kook, with all due respect, I know you're my partner, I know you think you're right, but you're wrong. Because what's your answer? What's your solution to all the problems that converts are facing today? What's your solution to a person who is married to a Jewish person? What is your solution to a person who's a child of such a marriage? You're going to make them just wait in line and take a ticket in 6 years and 10 years? Who says they're going to wait that long? Who says a lady isn't going to change her mind in 2 years? Forget about it. I'm not even going to convert. I hate those rabbis. I hate that court. That's why I'm not Jewish. Because I don't like those people. Says Rabbi Uziel, is that side of the coin any less important than yours? The mainstream establishment today would tell you, of course, we're right, Rabbi Uziel is wrong. Rabbi Uziel is saying, not only am I right that it's permissible to do such a thing, but I'm going out of my way to tell you that it's a mitzvah to do such a thing. And next week, God willing, and I'd ask you to leave these articles here, please don't read forward on your own. Or you can take them home, but please don't finish reading them, because the discussion around them is beautiful. I want to tell you that Rabbi Uziel's worldview, if it were followed today, would be the answer that would save so many of us from problems that exist already today in the Jewish community.